before we begin, so I'm a member of the Hulitsum First Nation, and I know, a lot of sessions, a lot of meetings we're in, there's always a land acknowledgement at the beginning. For me, I want to make sure that it's not just kind of a box checking exercise. So I typically like to try to personalize it as best as I can, but some of the formal parts, I want to acknowledge that I'm here in Vancouver and I am presenting from the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Coast Salish people, specifically the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. And I really encourage everybody to get super curious about where they're from, where they work, where they get to play. We're really fortunate, maybe I'm biased, but here in Canada with our forests and our land. And I think it's really important that we take time to acknowledge that. My little, like I said, I like to come up with a little tidbit of information to share and when doing acknowledgements. And one of the ones that I learned back in the day was that a lot of people's last names, so you'll see a lot of Wilsons and Johns and a lot of similar last names. And the reason that happened was because Indian agents would basically say, your last name no longer exists, you're going to use my first name as your last name. So anyhow, just a little fact, but I do really encourage, get curious, ask questions, know that it's okay to make mistakes. I think as long as we're trying to move forward, that's really all that matters. So that's my little land acknowledgement. Next up, just wanted to touch on some housekeeping. As I noted, tech, you can ask if you need any help. Please don't hesitate. Everyone will be muted throughout the session just to make sure it's clean and clear, but we do encourage, if you have questions that come up, please throw them in the chat. We really appreciate that curiosity. And if there's anything we feel deserves a little bit more time, perhaps at the end, or deserves a little bit more time in a private conversation separately, we'll acknowledge that and we'll make sure that they do get addressed if they don't get addressed on this immediate call, because we still want to make sure we get through everything. So acknowledging that, also just want to note, at the end, we will have like a kind of a dedicated Q&A, as I mentioned, which that recording part won't be shared. Lastly, we'll have contact information. I've asked one of our teammates here to throw our emails for the presenters in the chat so that you have access to that, but also at the end, there will be a contact page as well too. So that is that. And that is my welcome. I just want to acknowledge what's happening today is we're going to go through, Dan is going to take us through kind of a little bit of a market context, technology advancements. Then we're going to get into true action in forest and sort of see what that technology looks like when it's actually in process. And then next steps after. And again, we're not here to, this isn't like a salesy thing. There's a lot of different stakeholders at play, which I'll go on to the next slide here. And whether that's industry, Indigenous communities, government, or environmentalists, first of all, I am not an expert in any of this, really in anything at all, but maybe hockey once in a while. But I do want to acknowledge that from what I've experienced, is that our industry, I'll say in the lumber and forestry industry, one of the biggest challenges that we are faced with is that sometimes people are like, you're cutting down trees, you're bad. Period. So there's misconceptions that we all live with, whether that's in industry or whether that's in the Indigenous communities. And I think it's really, really important that if we ever want to move forward on any of this, that we're taking time to step back and sit in the seat of each of those segments and each of those stakeholders. So I do have a company, Takoda Consulting, and what I live for is the critical thinking piece. And I think that's what brought us all together today, was that opportunity to sit in the different seats to bring those different perspectives together to see where there's value that can be added for everybody. So I will continue on and pass this over to Mr. Dan White.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for your time today. I hope you find this terribly interesting. We obviously do. I just thought I'd give a little bit of an introduction to the folks that you're going to hear from in a moment. Obviously, we've heard from Hayley, and a massive thank you from us to Hayley for leading this. Hayley is an athletic nerd. She's passionate about making a positive impact through every chance she gets. So Hayley obviously is representing Takoda Consulting, and is focusing on working with male-dominated industries to better recruit, retain, and support women and historically marginalized groups. And Haley will be the MC, or the conductor, for today. I'm Daniel White. I am the CEO at Gentian. We are a company based primarily in the UK, but we have a Canadian office as well. And our focus is to help humans understand the truth about nature through technology. And you hear a little bit more about that in a second. I'm joined by my rock star colleague, Olga. Olga is a world expert in remote sensing. She has a PhD from Cambridge. And obviously, as you can see, 33 years of forest mapping under her belt. Olga's going to tell us about some great work we've been doing in Canada. With the final, but last but not least, is Graham. Graham's here representing Bullfinch. He's the Chief Commercial Officer. And Graham, Bullfinch is a new startup in Canada that's using ground-based devices and technology to help log and improve the inventory mapping of forests in particular. And he's responsible for the field deployment of devices at Bullfinch and working with the communities on the ground. So those are the people you'll be hearing from today. I just wanted to set the scene really from above the trees. Obviously, forestry is a massive part of Canada's economy. Employs over 200,000 people. And I'm looking at this from sort of three angles, really. One is there's the economic and the business side of forestry, and the GDP, the economic power of forestry. Secondly, we have a strengthening tailwind of biodiversity policies that are coming in. So just 2 months ago, Canada launched a Force for Nature, which is just under $4 billion have been earmarked to protect 30% of Canada's land and water. And a lot of, I think Canada should be really proud of how politically it's taking, how seriously it's taking nature compared to some other countries. And then we have 9% of the world's forestry in Canada, but I think the main brunt of this conversation is how can we work with the stewards of the land, and how can we use technology for stronger collaboration? So looking at protecting nature, working with communities, and making sure that economic growth continues is certainly at the center of what we're trying to do. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Olga, and hopefully we can go into a deep dive into the technology side of this. But before we do, actually,
I'm stealing it back here just for a moment. So appreciate some of you had thrown questions in when you registered. So thank you very much for doing that. So we wanted to address a couple of those just right off the top to kind of start the conversation. Again, nobody likes being talked at for an hour. So please do interact if there's questions. So the first question that we were asked was, what is your primary concern regarding current forest inventory accuracy? So I will hand that to Olga to answer.
Yes, so I've been recently using vegetative resource inventory in British Columbia. And as with any traditional forest inventory, it is parcel-based. So we do have detailed information on what's in that parcel, on species and on the ages for the leading species as well as heights. But it is within the parcel, so we don't have information per tree. So we can have some of that area already cut down because those inventories tend to be out of date. The current one in British Columbia is based on 2017 imagery. So one thing is being able to update it quickly, and the other thing is making it more accurate so we can actually see a single tree. This is what is lacking here. This is what now is possible with current technologies.
Awesome. I think you may have kind of started to answer that, but how often is metadata data updated?
Yeah, so again, I can only speak from vegetative resource inventory in Canadian context. So being based on 2017 data. What is being updated is the ages and heights of trees, but this is based on tree growth models. And again, if something has been harvested, it will be only noted in the next update with a fresh round of imagery, which is, of course, being air photography is not that easy and cheap to do. So that's why it doesn't happen every year.
Awesome, thanks. So there are some more questions. I'm thinking maybe we'll slide back into the presentation and some of the details Olga will answer as we go throughout. And again, please don't hesitate to write questions or message us directly. So I will pass it back to Olga to get through and share this part.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'd like to start by saying that the indigenous forest stewardship is the right framework to look at forest and sustainable resource use, and at how we can structure partnerships, how First Nations can partner with forestry industry and government and environmentalists to satisfy common goals, which is keeping nature, preserving nature, and for the government this could be to 2030 framework, and then for the forestry and lumber industry to keep that wood present so they can use it for their goals. And modern forest mapping, or smarter forest mapping as we call it, should integrate that indigenous knowledge and both traditional and smarter, more modern technologies of surveying. So talking of traditional, I'm talking about the manual forest inventory, which ends up being parcel based, and it is very costly. I'll go into detail later, but this is talking about manual grown plots and timber cruises and samples plots which are being extrapolated to larger areas. Cultural context is often omitted from those surveys, or at least used to be omitted, and scalability is low because they're expensive. And then we are going to cover other technologies based on satellite data, LiDAR, and artificial intelligence, drones as well, which can provide, especially when combined, a full story about the forests and wall-to-wall coverage. So we can do it anywhere on the globe these days, and we can do it for the whole of Canada if you want it. And indigenous knowledge should be integrated in this smarter forest mapping, because this is really the basis of the knowledge here. And scalability is high, so we can scale up to large areas at very low costs compared to traditional methods. So just to talk in a bit more detail about different methods. So starting with manual forestry inventory that many people know about. So a forest will go in the forest and measure tree diameters and heights, record species, and then record information about undergrowth as well. This provides really accurate data, but at high costs. So depending on the terrain, the remoteness, it will range between 30 and 200 Canadian dollars roughly from the data I've looked at. So it's labor intensive, time consuming as well. Spatial coverage is limited because you can only survey small areas with people on the ground. It could be challenging in remote and difficult terrain, and data can become outdated quickly because we cannot afford to send people on the ground in remote areas every year. Recently we had drones, and previously we also had air photography. So talking specifically about drones and planes, currently we can have very detailed imagery from those. And this is suitable for small and medium scale coverage, so for relatively large areas as well. But it does require drone operator on the ground or hire an aircraft. Again, that is connected with accessibility challenges in remote areas. The costs are quite significant, so it could be $5 to $30 per hectare for a manned plane, or high figures for the drone because it has smaller coverage, even though the detail is bigger. And then it can only survey top of the canopy. So when we have openings in the forest, you can see the undergrowth, but if it's dense forest, then you only see the tops of the trees. And this is just a drone, pretty image from a drone. It shows a very high level of detail you can get. However, when you have a forest on the ground, they can see all the different layers in the forest and record information on those, and the drone simply doesn't see that. Recent method is LiDAR. So that is light coming. This is active method of remote sensing. So a laser transmitter on a plane or drone emits a pulse, and the pulse goes into the forest and produces several returns, one from the top of the canopy, and then another one from the ground, and potentially also from somewhere in the middle. So you can actually map those layers in the forest and the vertical structure. So currently it's a gold standard for measuring canopy height, stand density, and biomass. And the limitations are that it is quite expensive. So you can see the prices here. So on a plane, it could be up to $30 per hectare, again, depending on the level of detail, how many returns per square meter you have. And then if you do it for helicopter or drone, that's even more expensive. So often it is commissioned as a one-off survey. So in British Columbia, for example, areas are often surveyed once, but then that becomes out of date and it's too expensive to repeat. That's what we also seen in Ontario. And obviously requires a platform, aircraft or drone, and it doesn't really give you full information about tree species on itself. So here on the left, we have a 3D representation of forest from LiDAR, and the colors here are heights. So it does show you heights and shape of crowns, so you can sort of deduce some of the tree species from that, but not precisely. So it gives very limited insight into species composition or tree health, just giving the 3D information. So then we come to information from satellites, which is, well, so we'll start with high resolution imagery. So I'm talking about pixel size of 30 to 50 centimeters per pixel. So very detailed. You can see every tree. So this could provide detailed and repeatable mapping anywhere on the globe. So global coverage, high resolution, and easy to repeat. That's important. You can repeat it every year. And you can also see some of the tree species and some of the health states. And it is cheaper than LiDAR, at least twice, and if in case of drones, helicopters, many times. Again, like a drone, it only sees the top canopy of the trees. But if you, for example, can combine it with a pre-existing LiDAR survey, then you can have the best of both detail and species. And using the multi-temporal data, you can actually get into mapping old growth forests and secondary forests. So the map on the left is a map we've done for salmon parks. This is just a small subset. And there we can see the dark green being the old growth forest and the lighter green being the secondary forest, and the yellow is regeneration on recent areas of harvesting. So this was also based on historical imagery, and this could go back as far as 1970s, and with air photography even further in time. So we can see the old growth quite accurately. And then the more recent source of data, it was always known once we had planes and air photography, they were doing stereo survey. Now drones can do that as well to produce 3D imagery of the forests. But now we have this capacity, anyone has this capacity from satellites at relatively low cost. So this could be stereo, so two pictures of the same area on the ground, or it could be tri-stereo, which is also available from satellites now. So just think about how to explain what is stereo. If you hold your finger in front of you, quite close to your nose, and you close one eye and look at it, and then close the other eye and you look at it, you see that the position of the finger as you see it is changing. And then if you put it a bit further away and do the same thing, it's changing less. So basically, because your eyes are at a distance, they're providing enough information to measure distance to that finger, and this is how we can derive tree heights from stereo. So we can do three-dimensional analysis of canopy height, area, and biomass from this data. Again, we have the limitation that we only see top canopy in dense forest. So we need either pre-existing terrain model or LiDAR data, which also provide a terrain model to make the height estimates quite accurate. And again, it's not that expensive, so it's about twice as expensive as a mono imagery, because you have twice as many images and different kinds of analysis you can do in addition. And then an example of the data you can produce from stereo satellite survey, where you have accurate information on trees. So this is an area in Scotland where we did analysis of tree biomass. So we derived tree heights from a pre-existing TEM and the stereo, and then we knew the species, so we calculated the tree biomass from height, species information, and wood density. And this is an area of forest. So some of those scattered trees are actually on the peatland, which is being restored. So people don't want Sitka spruce trees to be on peatland because it sucks out the water. So the company which is managing this land is going to remove the trees and sell the wood to finance further peatland restoration. So this is why they wanted to know tree biomass. And again, doing all these things on the ground would be too expensive, and they won't be able to cover all areas. And this provides a cost-efficient way of analyzing the information about trees. And then another new source of data is hyperspectral satellite survey. So the satellite data I was showing you before, they're called multispectral. They have several spectral bands, so they see forest in color like our eyes, and typically also have another spectral channel in near infrared, which is good for mapping vegetation. With hyperspectral imagery, you typically now have 30 to 45 channels. And the key advantage now is that now we have 5-meter resolution imagery from space. It used to be 30 meters. Now it is 5 meters, available from several providers in Canada, US, and more coming up. So we can map tree species and tree health with this data very efficiently. Again, global coverage, easy to repeat, inexpensive. So it's like the sort of normal satellite survey, could be even less. So again, the limitation is it's top canopy trees. We need ground truth on species. It can recognize many species, but the forest inventories we have are not localized enough quite often. So we need to collect that ground data. And also, if you combine this data with either LiDAR or satellite stereo survey, we can get a digital twin. So we'll have the species, we'll have the heights of trees, we have the canopy area. So this is going to be superior to what we were able to have before. Now, a key question is, how do you collect this ground information that we need, for example, to provide species for this species mapping? And here there are also new innovative solutions, and one of them is wearable sensors. And my colleague Graham is going to talk about those. Over to you, Graham.
Thanks, Olga. Just before I let Graham speak, we let Graham speak. There was a question asking, is there a way to value both traditional and smart forest mapping? And again, not the expert here, but I'll let Olga answer in a moment. But I do think a big part of the conversations that we've had prior to this call is the importance of all stakeholders coming forward with what their challenges are, what matters to them, what are their biggest concerns, and then making sure that all of those aspects are considered in any of these decisions moving forward. So that's my little 2 cents on it. But Olga, if you have anything else to add, please go ahead.
Yeah. So I'm not sure in which way. I would say both of them have high value, because the traditional surveys provide that historical information and also provide a start point for new technology to develop. And currently, when we're mapping tree species for salmon parks, I do use vegetative resource inventory and then my expert knowledge, so I can tell in the detailed imagery how Sitka spruce looks like and how older trees look like. And then I can actually provide the training data for our deep learning neural networks to map those species. But if there wasn't a traditional inventory, I wouldn't be able to do that. And also, I think, traditional inventory is good in a sense, but you can have an expert collecting very specific, very detailed data. although on small plots. But this is a way to focus data collection on what your project needs, and also it's good to combine with traditional indigenous knowledge as well. And then smart forest mapping comes in to make it more cost efficient, in some ways more detailed, for example, adding information on a species for hyperspectral, and making the repeat monitoring every year if you need very cost efficient and very accurate. So you can record where a new harvesting happened. You can even predict where harvesting is going to happen if you image at the right time, and you can stop people from illegal harvesting by looking at the roads they make. So it's all sorts of these things that the remote sensing allows for management of the land, which could be also proactive.
Awesome, thank you. I am going to hand it to Graham. Nick, I do see your question. We're going to get to that one just after this next section. And also, Olga, would love it afterwards for you to share a little bit more about the Salmon Parks project and what that means. And perhaps we can throw the link in the chat so people can go read about that separately there. But over to you, Graham.
Okay, thank you, Haley and Olga. Yeah, so this is where we come in. It's a chance to provide a cost-effective and efficient way to collect ground data. So we've come up with a wearable device that's quite simple to use, and it really makes that ground truthing scalable. So ground truthing is important because it provides verified real-world data needed to train and test AI algorithms. And sometimes there's some holdbacks with remote sensing tools like satellite imagery. As Olga's pointed out to us, there can be distortions from weather. We're only hitting the tops of the canopies, atmospheric conditions. So the ground truthing really gives us a chance to calibrate and gives us the data we need to fix these errors. It can also be used for biodiversity and understory health. So where the satellites capture the upper canopy, the forest floor is for us to use our devices and capture the data down there. So this level of ground truthing allows the researchers to identify species composition, spot early signs of invasive pests, diseases, and further assess the understory health. And since it's a boots on the ground approach, we can work with different groups and feed into that local community knowledge and that traditional ecological knowledge as well from the communities we're working with. So yeah, this is Bullfinch, ground truth under the canopy, and it really is as simple as this. It's a hook-on, strap-on device that you equip your field teams with, and then you walk at different headings through the woods to capture the real-time ground data. And then the data flows through a seamless integration from the field observations into the cloud. So however the client wants it presented to them, we can structure the report that way. So here we have just a quick demo video of the device in action. Olga, I might have to get you to click.
Oh, yes. There. Okay. Yep. I'll just do that.
Thank you.
Do that. Yes. There it is.
So this is the screen of our device as we, maybe press play one more time. I think it paused. So as we're in the field here, what happens is we get a readout of the species as they're being identified as we walk through the woods. And then on the right-hand side, it's our improved geolocation. So for me, the video is paused, but it might be working for others. And then the next slide here. Oh. Let's see.
Yeah.
And then here are some screen grabs of real-time collection of several different species. So this was during a project in Ontario, and we have a few examples here of white ash, sugar maple, and red maple being collected by the device in the field. And beyond that, we have another quick demo video of what the device is doing to capture that diameter measurement. So you can see we get the full taper of the tree, and that can lead to volume calculations. so on and so forth. So this is what our device is doing behind the scenes. And then this DBH analysis example really shows the measurement accuracy at scale. So in the little graph on the bottom here, we can see that we're really getting close to that 95, 98% accuracy, which we're continuing to work at, but quite pleased with so far.
Yeah, and I think, Graham, you said that you're aiming to be able to collect several hundred trees per hour. Yeah, like I think you collected 300 trees in one of the sites in 1 or 2 hours. Yep. So now we are going to show a case study we did together in Salt Spring Island in British Columbia. So in this case, we had a stereo imagery from archives, which was just 2 images rather than 3 images. So we wanted, first of all, to validate it against the LiDAR data, which are available for this colored area on the island. So we had 4 areas where we had both stereo and the LiDAR data. So first of all, we looked at the number of trees that we can infer from the LiDAR data by analyzing the 3D mapping and from the stereo data. So, and you can see there that at different sites, sometimes it's really close, just a few trees difference, but anywhere it stays within a couple of % of the total area of the total number of trees per site. So it's quite good. And then we looked at the crown shapes. So here on the left, you see crowns generated from LiDAR. So the way it's been done, the software defines the top points of canopies and then defines what approximately the crowns are. So it divides the area between the top canopies. And so they are quite close for LiDAR and from satellite. And then we looked at the locations of those top points on the canopies. So stereo here on the right in rose, these are rose-colored points, and LiDAR white points. So again, you can see that, yeah, so each crown is, well, each pixel here is, I think, 25 centimeters. So they're quite close to each other in the absolute majority of times. So that's good too. And then we looked at the tree heights defined by a LiDAR compared to ground data, and then by stereo compared to ground data. And you can see that they have close correlations to the ground data. Stereo is a bit worse. One of the reasons probably that it's only 2 images, not 3. Yeah, so they have sort of the same sort of distribution. There are things to still work on in terms of getting tri-stereo imagery when we actually task a satellite, and then it will be more accurate. I think here I can also answer the question I've seen in the chat on the absolute accuracy of these surveys. For the stereo survey, you can think about the relative accuracy and the absolute accuracy. So the relative accuracy is usually twice the resolution of the imagery. So if you have 30 centimeter pixel, your accuracy will be about 60 centimeters. So it's not as good as the plane-based LiDAR, but it is much more efficient and it can cover large areas and update it. And then the absolute accuracy, it depends. You have to put it exactly on the terrain model, and then you can actually have them equal to relative accuracy. But before you do that, it will be probably 1.5, 3 meters. But once you've combined it using reference points with the ground, that'll be sort of 60 centimeters accuracy. And after we've done this validation, we actually went on our pilot version of full story, telling a full story about the forest, meaning overstory from the top of the canopy and also under the canopy. So the stereo imagery also comes with a multispectral color imagery. So this is an image of a part of one of the sites. We had the ground truthing data from Graham from Bullfinch devices, and we used it to train a model based on Wyvern Dragonet hyperspectral satellite. Wyvern is a Canadian company, and we had data on this area as well. And therefore, we were able to use the crowns that we generated from stereo, and then the results of the species mapping from hyperspectral to see how these trees are distributed. And then what we were able to do as well is to derive tree heights from the stereo model. And then we calculated the above ground biomass using tree height information, the species information, and the wood density, as it's usually done. So in the future, what would be also good to add is the information on ground biodiversity, which we have in some of these areas, but we are still working on that, still work in progress. So yeah, I think this is a sort of very quickly an overview of some of the modern technologies that are available both in Canada and everywhere in the world now. For each particular site that you have in mind to survey, a combination of different survey methods would be probably unique, depending on first of all, the costs, and then what data you already have for the area. So as I was saying, if you already have a LiDAR survey, which gives you detailed information on the heights, you can use detailed satellite survey or hyperspectral survey to add information on the species. And then you have a digital twin, which has heights and tree crown shapes and species. So you can look at more valuable tree species from different points of views. You can also add historic data from historic inventories to look at changes. You can add historic satellite data to see how the forest changed, and then you can update it so you can follow different changes in the forest. Yeah, so there could be various recipes depending on data already available and costs. And Dan, I think it's over to you for a moment, and to Haley. Yep.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Graham. Thank you, Olga. I just wanted to sort of wrap up the technology side of things, really, and just say, I think from a vision perspective, I think Canada could be the first country in the world that's able to map every single tree. I think now technology's put us in a position when we combine traditional knowledge on the ground with technology on the ground, with stereo satellite imagery combined with some of the other things we've seen here. We're in a position really now to really take a massive leap forwards, which helps forestry, which helps nature, and which also helps communities as well really understand the truth about what's happening with nature and with forests. So I hope that this little peek under the hood in relation to what's possible was interesting. And I'll hand back to Haley, who can wrap up with some questions and give us a closing statement as well.
Yeah, no, thank you very much, Daniel. That was, it's fascinating to me. And I remember when we first met and had brunch and talking about how it's kind of like facial recognition, but for trees and plants. And I think that was a really like clean and simple way for people like myself to understand. And it is pretty impressive. I think to your point, there's a lot of, I think I truly believe everyone cares about the forest. From their different seats and perspectives, whether they're my friends who joined the call who are like to be out in nature going for a hike sort of thing, even if it's not necessarily part of their business or their life and work, essentially. I think it really matters, and I just appreciate the work that people like you're all doing, whether it's somebody presenting today or somebody who's on the call who just cares about doing the right thing. I think it's incredible. And I love the name True Forest because I think that, again, if we can get rid of some of the like misconceptions and it's just pure data, this is what it is, this is what we see. Speaking to some friends who work in the forest fire aspect of our province as well too, and how valuable this information and data could be to help manage the forest and identify potential issues prior to them happening. That was really exciting to me as well too. So that's just my little notes here. But I did want to also ask Graham, so for people who are just regular humans, or who's currently or who can use that technology, and is it something that, like, if I wanted to go for a hike because I'm super slow and access and capture some of that data, is that something that like me as a regular human could do?
Yeah, we do have a goal of releasing a pedestrian or a citizen scientist model. Otherwise, we are working with different communities that have lands they're looking to survey, but definitely in our roadmap, there is a chance to equip citizens to help us collect that data. So yeah, that's something we're really looking into, and that educational component is going to be huge.
Yeah, and I think anybody who's lived through the pine beetle here in BC too, to be able to identify some of those invasive species prior to, I was at our nursery, I work with Western Forest Products at our nursery 2 days ago, and talking about outdated data, that was like, that hit me in the face, because how cyclical, like one year, you know, these pests are more prevalent, and then another year they're not at all, or things like that. So having the regular data to be able to actually go in and make an impact now, and how important that is, that was just something else that kind of drew my attention and enthusiasm. Sorry, go ahead, Olga.
Yes, so one thing I wanted to mention in response to Graham's comment, we have been doing a pilot study of these sensors in salmon parks. So the indigenous-led initiative on recreating the salmon populations in the land of Muchalat First Nation. Yeah, it was in the sort of in the core area of the parks, and also in Klepti Creek, which is a newly co-managed area. So the goal is, once those models are a bit more completed, that Graham goes out on land and teaches the indigenous forest guardians how to use this tech, so they can use it day to day in their land management decisions. Yeah, another things we've been doing there again is mapping the primary and secondary forest over the whole of salmon parks, which is about 700 square kilometers, and that was using historic imagery, so we could ascertain that that forest was never cut by forestry. Yes, well, I think that's what I forgot what I was going to react to your comments, Haley, so I'll pick up it when I remember. Sorry.
No problem. Thank you. If there are any other questions, please, again, throw them in the chat, or you can use the QR code to reach out. We put Olga's contact on there, and I will throw mine in the chat as well too. But ultimately, again, kind of like I said in the beginning, I just appreciate that people care about this stuff, and I think that we need to in this time. And there's a real opportunity with the focus of our government trying to do as much as we can resource-wise for our country. So I'm really excited about it. Kind of 3 ways. Yeah, if you're interested in learning more, please don't hesitate to reach out. If you're interested in a pilot project, maybe, again, whichever sector you're in, if you're like, hey, how can we be involved to kind of be at the early stages of some of these conversations, that's really valuable. And then just sharing your perspective. So good, bad, or ugly. If you're like, this scares me because of X, we want to know that. So then we can actually address it in the most respectful manner, ensuring that all parties are considered in this. But yeah, I just ultimately want to huge thank you for everyone spending your time. I know some people will be watching this later because they couldn't make it in time, but just thank you very much for joining today. And if there's no other questions or comments, then we'll let you. Yeah, go ahead, Olga.
Actually, yeah, I just remembered what I wanted to say
No
first
problem.
of all. So in response to your comments about the bark beetle, so hyperspectral imagery is sometimes used to do early detection when the damage is not yet extensive. So you can pinpoint locations where it's happening, and then try and do some interventions on the ground before it spreads to large areas. So that has been done before. And I think there is also a question about what satellite constellations are used for stereo satellite service. So there is a number. I personally used American, French, and Chinese constellations. So the Maxar, which is now Wanderer, and then Airbus, and I can't remember what the Chinese was, but it was actually very good in salmon parks because this is near vertical imagery, and we could see those trees in great detail. So that was really useful. Yeah.
So 33 years, Olga. Do you start when you were 5? Is that correct?
No. So 1993, I had my first research project, which was actually back in Moscow University. I originally come from Russia, but I've done my master's then in the UK. So that was looking at the change of forests around Moscow. So in 19th century, it was all agricultural area, and I used the old maps to ascertain that. And then in 1990s, which was my most recent image, it was much more forested because after the Second World War, a lot of agriculture and lots of villages vanished, and then agriculture is not that efficient, and it's sort of boreal climate, and so it's been all covered by spruce trees and pine trees. Yeah, so that's what I was mapping, and then it was continued by my colleagues afterwards. Because now the trees are disappearing, lots of cottages are being built around the huge city. So that's what also happens in Canada and other areas sometimes. So again, that just shows the power of satellite imagery to repeat those surveys when you need it.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you everyone for joining today, and yeah, just encourage people to think outside the box. If you have ideas, questions, thoughts on any of this, just appreciate any communication. So we'll let you have your afternoon and lunch now, or wherever you are in the world.
Yeah, and please get in touch if you have any questions. We'll be happy to tell you more about this satellite and ground surveys, and put you in touch with relevant people and connect.
Thank you.